Well, welcome to another edition of the Seattle Thunderbirds Alumni Series. The first two interviews that I was able to do, I was able to talk with players who I was familiar with, players that were with the team since I've been doing the broadcast. I'm going to go back further now to a time when I was not the voice of the Thunderbirds and bring in a T-Bird from the mid-90s as Blair Manning is joining us. Although Blair, I will say this, in the early 90s, the Tacoma Rockets were in the Western Hockey League. Their last season in Tacoma, I did their broadcast, and then I did one game, I believe, the next year as the broadcaster of the Thunderbirds. I was filling in. So I'm sure along the way somewhere, very possibly did a game where you were involved as a Seattle Thunderbird. But welcome to our series of alumni interviews.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it. And certainly I did play against the Rockets in their last year there, so that we definitely would have crossed paths.
Well, you were just in Kent, in the Seattle area. You were here for the ceremony to retire the number 12 of Patrick Marleau. I found it interesting, all the former players that came that played with him when he was in Seattle. Some of them played much longer with him. He only was here for 2 years. But I believe you were limited to about 45 games as a teammate of his. So I thought that was amazing that while you weren't here for his full tenure, that you would come back. He made that impact, or that team had such an impact that you would come back for that event.
Yeah, for sure. There were a number of things. Obviously, it was great to celebrate Pat. We didn't really stay in touch necessarily throughout his career, but I always kind of cheered him on from afar. He was a young kid when he came to Seattle. I was an overage. And, I did my best to kind of help him be comfortable in Seattle, help him get comfortable on the ice. The current owners, Dan and Lindsay Leckelt, are really good friends of mine. So there's a number of ties and reasons why I came back. I did know a bunch of the guys there, played with some of them even further on down the line in minor pro. So just kind of all the worlds collided to be able to get back, see the new rink, see the setup, catch up with Don Nockbar, our former coach, and all that. It was, I'm glad that I carved out the time and made it work.
Yeah, Don Nockbar came back, and obviously Patrick had some very nice things to say about him. What was your experience with Snacks?
It was great. It was his, I believe it was his first year coaching. He was a pretty young guy, just out of playing. I think he did a pretty good job. You go from being a player, being in the room and having that camaraderie to now all of a sudden you kind of got to steer the ship and discipline guys when you need to. And at the same time, you're helping young kids from small towns in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, acclimate to a major city and try and get the best performance out of them. So I thought he did a great job. I liked his coaching style. He held everyone accountable. And, but I think he was fair in doing so. So, I mean, it was an amazing time. And I really learned a lot from him.
Now, you did not have to acclimate to a big city. You're from Vancouver, correct? So you were kind of used to a more metropolitan upbringing, right? So Seattle wasn't a shock to you?
Well, actually, I was born in Vancouver. I don't know why I'd always said that on my, wherever I kind of had my stats or whatever listed, but at a very young age we moved to Alberta, so I was from Sherwood Park, Alberta, just outside of Edmonton. So yeah, I mean, not a small city like some of the Saskatchewan guys, but not a major city. It was definitely the traffic and all the inconveniences of living in a major U.S. city were pretty new and frustrating at times.
Well, we'll talk about the other transition you made, because you initially went to the University of Massachusetts Amherst and played collegiately at the NC2A level, played one season there, and then obviously at some point made a decision. So what was that transition like for you, going from the NC2A to playing in the Western Hockey League in Seattle?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it worked out really well. I had decided that I was going to leave school. Kind of take a shot at playing pro. I had chosen a new Division I program in the NCAA. It was clear there was going to be some hardships in those 4 years that I would have spent there. I had a couple other offers that I potentially should have taken, but I mean, that's kind of in the past. So when I looked at moving, I actually thought I was going to go to Portland. I had a couple good friends in Portland, Scotty Lankow and Nolan Pratt, and they were so I kind of reached out to them, and they said, don't talk to anyone. We'll talk to our coaches. So they indeed wanted me to come. Well, my dad went to the local AJHL game that night and kind of started talking to some guys that he knew. He wasn't super connected in the hockey world, but just kind of told a few guys that I was leaving school. So the word got around a bit, and Seattle put in for my rights the same time as Portland did that next morning. And my rights went to Seattle because I think they were 3-14 or something. They were lower in the standings. So I was kind of shocked. I got a call from Seattle, expecting to get a call from the Portland guys just saying like, hey, you're on our list. Do you want to come? And I'd already kind of gone down the road where I'd told my coaches and the athletic advisor in UMass that I was leaving. So I was kind of pot committed at that point. So I went to Seattle kind of on a whim. I got there. Some things aligned pretty well. Chris Herberger got sent back from the American Hockey League. And we just kind of, we kind of caught stride there. I think Ferrone came from Portland, and with this a few pieces arrived, and I think everyone started to buy into what Coach Knockbauer was doing, and we ended up having just a great season the first year. So it was kind of by accident that I got to Seattle, but I think I was able to benefit from a good situation.
Yeah, looking back on it now, you feel you made the right, or at least the right decision was made for you coming to Seattle vis-a-vis going to Portland. What was Portland's record like those years? What would you maybe help them do that you were able to help Seattle do? I mean, did you think in the end, okay, it worked out well for me?
I think 100% it worked out well for me. I mean, the big allure to going to Portland at the time was it was during the NHL lockout. So Adam Deadmarsh and Jason Weimer were back with Portland, and they were kind of looking for a guy to play in the middle. So obviously, as an unproven guy in the Western League, to go in and have a chance to play with those two guys was pretty appealing for sure. Having the guys that I knew with Nolan and Scott there was appealing. It was obviously a big change, not an easy decision to leave a 4-year athletic scholarship to go there. So there were a lot of things that seemed like it would line up well in Portland, but 100%, I think things happen for a reason, and landing in Seattle was excellent for me.
In your time with the T-Birds, about a year and a half or so, you were a fairly prolific goal scorer on the team. Talk about some of the line mates that you got to play with to help set you up, get those offensive numbers up.
Well, the first year I was kind of lucky enough to find my way to kind of eke my way onto the power play, and I mean you had a power play of Chris Wells, Chris Herberger, Jan Herdina, and Darren Quint, and myself, and I think we all kind of had 90 points. So I think I was able to benefit from that, obviously, immensely. I kind of played more of a third line role that first year. I played with Scott Burt and Dave Jeselowski. We played, we were able to contribute offensively, but a lot of it came on the power play with those guys. And then the second year, playing with Patrick and Chris Schmidt and Dan Tompkins and a few of those guys, it's easy to create offense when you play with other good offensive players. And I mean, Patrick was a young guy, but I think it's pretty evident the type of player he was, and he opened up a lot of ice time for me. And I was, I kind of like to carry the puck and create plays, and we kind of found some chemistry in both years in Seattle that I was there. I benefited from that.
Now, you eventually would end up in Medicine Hat. Talk about transitioning and leaving Seattle, and was it a disappointment for you at that time? What were your feelings going through that process?
Yeah, it was disappointing for sure. I mean, I think the team was at a bit of a transition point. Russ Farwell had come in. He was looking at kind of building things around Patrick a little bit. So he decided to move out some of the older players. I mean, looking back, hindsight's 2020. A lot of us kind of wanted to make a run for it. We thought we had a pretty strong team, and the one missing piece that we didn't have was Darren Quint, and he was up in the NHL at the time. And ironically, he got sent back kind of after all of us older guys got traded out of town. So it was a bit bittersweet for sure. I loved it in Seattle. I had great billets and a great a billet partner there, and Drew Palmer and Danny Tompkins. Coach was good. He kind of gave us a lot of responsibility as the older guys, and I like that for sure. So yeah, it was definitely bittersweet and a big change going from Seattle to a smaller town Medicine Hat.
You eventually had a fairly lengthy professional career playing mostly at the high minor level, the AHL, the old IHL, sometime in the ECHL as well. Just kind of talk about your professional career and again, just transitioning from playing in the Western Hockey League going to be a professional.
Yeah, it was. I wasn't quite too sure what I was going to do. I had gone to a couple of NHL training camps there. I'd obviously never been drafted. And after my final season, I was actually enrolled at U of A to go and kind of take advantage of some of my Western Hockey League scholarship money. The old Canadian national program was still going, where they ran a team every year, not just for the Olympics. Of course, the NHL players weren't allowed to play, so I had an opportunity to go play on that team. And then, kind of last minute, St. Louis came in and offered me a spot at training camp. So I always wanted to play in the NHL, so I took that opportunity. I was in St. Louis for quite a while, and then I got sent to Worcester, and Worcester was their American League team, and I played very well in Worcester. It's kind of the first time that the business of hockey really reared its ugly head in a sense. Like, I was a pretty naive guy. I didn't have a ton of people or experience to draw from, and I was in Worcester and playing quite well, and the season was starting the next day, and one of the vets was kind of just pulled me aside, like, "Hey, you played really well. Like, have they talked to you? Do you know what you're doing?" I said, "No, I haven't really heard anything." And he said, "Well, tomorrow they have to either release you or sign you." So I just kind of figured I would go to the rink tomorrow and sign a contract and be on my way with Worcester, and got there to the rink in the morning and kind of got the tap on the shoulder from the trainer. He's like, "Coach wants to see you." And I was like, "Oh, I wonder what he wants." And he just kind of looked, he's like, "Oh, you don't know, you're going to get a bullet." So I went in there and they said they were sending me down, and, they kind of had some nice things to say. And so I prodded them a little bit, and they had said that they didn't have any contracts available. And so that was pretty frustrating, because I kind of asked them, I said, "Well, you guys knew that I was going to U of A, and you knew that I had a chance to play on the national team, and you brought me for a tryout on a team where there were no open contracts. Like, I had no chance of making this team." And they were kind of looked at me like, yeah. So it was pretty jarring that happened, and pretty frustrating at the same time. I'm sure a lot of guys have far worse stories. It wasn't the end of the world, but I did pass up a couple pretty good opportunities. So it's the middle of October. I can't go back and catch up in school. So I ended up going down to their East Coast League affiliate in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And Pierre Maguire, a somewhat polarizing hockey figure, was coaching there. And Pierre was amazing to me. He taught me to be a pro. He got me called up on a number of occasions. And I just kind of figured that I would be on my way from there. I would kind of make my way to the American League and kind of keep going. And 13 years later, I had lots of experiences, lots of cities, and I'd do it all over again if I could.
Well, let me ask you this here. What are you doing these days now that you've put the skates up?
My initial transition out of hockey, I got on the Edmonton Fire Department there. A couple T-Bird alumni, Tony Mohagan being one of them, who's in town. He's also on the fire department. I really wanted kind of a stable job. I never really had. It was just hockey, and then in the summers I would work at my dad's. My dad had a painting company, but never really had like a stable job where you knew you're going to get paid. My first son was on his way, and I was pretty worried about the transition. So I got on with the fire department there. It was a great career. The one thing with it is it's seniority based promotion. So I got on when I was 35 years old. So there were a lot of guys that were quite a bit younger than I was that were senior to me. So there wasn't going to be really any chance of advancement or promotion. I was going to kind of be stuck as as a firefighter, which was good when you're 35, maybe not when you're 55 and your body starts breaking down. So I looked at a couple things, and then I actually got into a business opportunity with the current owners there in Seattle, Dan and Lindsay, and we own an HVAC rep firm where we sell kind of large commercial and industrial HVAC equipment, chillers, air handling units, and all that kind of fancy stuff there that goes on buildings. So Yeah.
Well, it's great that gives you that connection still to Seattle through the ownership. Let me ask you lastly, going back to the mid 90s as a T-Bird, just what do you remember what was happening in Seattle at that time that kind of when you come back here, you think about?
Well, that's a great question, Tom. I think it was just such a unique experience living in that city. There were so many things that we had never really been exposed to. We were fortunate to close the old Mercer Street barn, which was just an amazing junior hockey arena atmosphere. And then we moved into the new Key Arena, which was the nicest building that any of us junior kids had played in. So just kind of that transition from the old junior team into really what's become the Western League now, where a lot of the buildings are nice and the kids have a lot of great amenities and they're really well looked after. We kind of we were part of that early transition, I find, into where it's big league hockey now, the Western Hockey League. It's not it's not just kind of tiny small town community owned junior teams. It's a big business, and it was kind of neat to be a part of that.
Well, it's good to catch up with the former T-Birds. I know a lot of the pictures that were posted on social media after the retirement of the jersey of Patrick Marleau, the fans were just tickled to see all these former players come back and be part of that. And you were certainly a big piece of that ceremony the other night. We appreciate your time. And again, you've got that connection with the team through the ownership. So don't be a stranger. Come down anytime and join us. And always a Thunderbird once you put on that jersey. So it's good to talk to you. We appreciate your time.
So I really appreciate you having me on. This has been a nice trip down memory lane here.
That's Blair Manning, the former Seattle Thunderbird, as we continue our series of speaking with former alumni, and we'll have more coming in the future. So thanks for being with us.